Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Strettycast. I'm delighted to have Mike again, and we have Connor. Connor, first time you've been with us in a while. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Not too bad at all, lads. How are you?
Yeah, keeping well. Quarantine. How are you, Mike? Keeping safe, hope?
Yeah. What is it, like day 10 or 12 or whatever at the quarantine house? Yeah, it's not too bad. I think everyone's finally starting to appreciate the seriousness of the situation now. I usually get out once a day just to kind of get out of the house, and people are standing, I'd say, roughly about a Richard Osman's length apart. That's about 2 meters. So I think people are finally getting a point now to stop taking a piss and actually start taking this seriously.
Some frightening numbers in the UK the last few days.
Yeah, it's basically the numbers of infected are doubling every day, and at the moment the number of deaths is doubling roughly around the same rate.
Yeah, it's frightening. We've a few bits to discuss in the podcast this week. There's been a lot of transfer speculation, and to be honest, before we get into it, I find this transfer period quite strange. There's no football being played. We don't know when football will resume. We don't really know if what's going to happen with next season or when it's going to be safe to play football again. So that's obviously going to mean that the transfer market could be postponed as well. Because if they plan to allow the current season to go on past the dates and go into the summer and beyond, you can't have a transfer window open then. Because you have teams in the relegation zone that might splash the cash and overspend what they're able to, and just to stay out of that zone and get Premier League money the following year. So the transfer window probably won't be able to go ahead either if there's no games and there's no schedule for upcoming seasons. But on that, as well as, like, people are dying, and I wonder, are football clubs really working on transfers at the moment, or are they worried about safety and when games will be back? You know, are people negotiating transfer deals and touting players? I find it odd to be even covering. Connor, like, do you think United are on the phone to Raiola at the moment looking for the Ligt?
Anything you read regarding the Raiola client, you have to really take with a mound of salt. Really, I think the Pogba talk in the lead up to the suspension of the season, and of talk of Pogba wanting to play with Fernandes and keen to get back in the team. Pogba doesn't have that Euro shop window this summer. He's been out of, contention to play for United since September, really, in my mind, with a view to keeping himself fit for a summer shop window and looking to obviously earn a move to Real Madrid or Juventus, as the case may be. When it's Aaron Ramsey's been mentioned in terms of a swap deal, cash plus player for Pogba. De Ligt, I see him really as another pawn in Raiola's game. I think that United should steer clear. You've seen with Haaland in January that they were quite reluctant to engage with, potential sell-on clauses, commissions, etc. So I think I'd leave it well enough alone. Let him, he's had from what I've seen quite a bit of him this season. He's had a pretty poor year in the Champions League and in Serie A with Juventus. He is only 20, so there is obviously room to grow, and he had a season last year where he led his team to a domestic title and a Champions League semi-final. So by no means would write him off as a player, but I just think that with what's going on as well at the minute, the big thing around the transfer window and what clubs' priorities should be, it seems to me that with players' contracts expiring on the 30th of June and the potential for the season to extend beyond that into July, potentially August, you're looking at a transfer window where I don't really think it should be opened until there's a definitive line in the sand on the current season. Give it maybe 2-3 months. If the transfer window has to extend into, I don't know, September, October, it's all hypothetical at the minute. So United would have had lists of players drawn up 2-3 months ago, January, February, for the summer. So I don't think anything new would have come into Ollie's thoughts with what's gone on, to be honest.
You watch a lot of Serie A, Mike, so if the Ligt was available and all of a sudden United were alerted of that information, do you think they should go for him?
Absolutely, they'd be crazy not to. He did start the season quite poorly. Although the 5 or 6 weeks leading up to when the season was shut down, he was actually very, very good and was playing regularly. He suffered at the start of the season, obviously taking a step up to an enormous club like Juve, but also suffered from the fact that Chiellini was unavailable because of quite a serious injury. And he was instead partnered with Bonucci, who I've always found to be vastly overrated as a defender. And also they didn't have Meni Benatia either, who would be the sort of the like-for-like replacement of Chiellini in terms of just being an out-and-out stopper who could marshal a back line. I think the Ligt needed someone like that next to him. But he's a very, very gifted player. He's a natural leader. And also, I think, obviously, Ole's been experimenting more and more with a back three. He would be absolutely spot on in that kind of system. He's very good at playing the ball out from the back, very good at marshalling the line, and has that tactical versatility that a lot of continental players are given at a young age. I think they'd be crazy not to. I don't know how much truth there is to the story. It is kind of like this interregnum basically has given us what can only be described as an early silly season, when you usually get this closed season where you just get all this mindless transfer speculation. I would be very surprised if Juve were in the business of selling him. And from what we gathered from the Haaland transfer, it seems United don't want to do any business with Raiola in terms of bringing any of his clients into the club right now. And I mean, the only situation where I feel this could arise is obviously if Juventus really did need to raise some cash quite quickly, and obviously this is something that all clubs are thinking about right now because they're having to think about preserving what money they have because they've got what's happening with the television deals going into the next year. That he is one of the two main saleable assets, along with Paulo Dybala. I would imagine if we were going to buy someone from Juventus, I think Dybala would be more likely than De Ligt.
Yeah, no, I think what the whole thing with Raiola is, and United being wary of doing business with him, I suppose it comes a lot down to the player's character too. We can all bab about Raiola, but players go to him because he is one of the world-renowned agents. He gets them the best deals, but we didn't have any problems with Zlatan when he was at the club. And Pogba just seems to be the type that won't tell Raiola to shut up. And that's the big problem. The big problem is that there's no respect there whatsoever from the agent. And the player, for whatever reason, isn't getting involved too much. He's happy to let his agent do all the talking, and that's why he's being spotlighted right now. But not every player does that, and it'd be interesting to see now with this talk of an exit how De Ligt is in the media and how these stories come about. Because if it's the same old ding dong, then United be right to stay away. But if it's not, this is a top player we're talking about, a player that at the age of 19 was the captain of Ajax, led them to a league title, got them to a Champions League semi-final. He's got so much experience at that level, and as you mentioned, although he's struggled this season in Italy, he's shown traits of sheer quality. He can play from the back, and if this guy came into a back three at United, and before we came on, myself and Connor were speaking about if he was partnered by Maguire, the fear would be again not enough pace in defence, but with a back three, Eric Bailly, Tuanzebe, if Tuanzebe can get fit, that doesn't sound too bad, does it, Connor?
No, it doesn't. And you've obviously got Maguire as well, who likes to play from the back. Lindelof as well, although for me, he's probably regressed in the last 12 to 18 months. I see him as pretty flaky, to be honest. A lot of physical challenges, high balls that he gets caught under. And, if you were to pinpoint a physical weakness in the United back three or back four, he is the obvious one. Bailly stepped in pre-suspension of the season against Chelsea, having not played or started a game in God knows how many months. And he's doing Cruyff turns in his own box now. Mad as that would seem, and, he can be quite reckless. There is, having watched him, particularly in his first full season when he did stay injury free, I think up until the semi-final of the Europa League, maybe against Celta Vigo. Yeah. I think that was it. He had a great first season, and for me, if you're adding quality, you can never have too many good players. But there is obviously Marcus Rowe who'll come back. They'll probably look to get a buyer there. They might struggle again. They might have to send him out on loan again. And you've got obviously Tuanzebe, who's I think it was the Liverpool game at home this season. He got injured in the warm up where he was due to actually to start in that game. He captained the team against Rochdale in the Carabao Cup, and from all noises, whilst he was coming through the youth ranks, you have a born leader there as well. So you've got essentially three captains in terms of obviously Maguire's in place at the minute. The Ligt potentially, if he were to come, and Tuanzebe, build around that, and you have the option for a back four or back three. But again, I just think that at the minute there are more pressing issues in terms of transfer targets further up the pitch.
No, absolutely. And as well as that, I think part of Solskjaer's plan too, when he's coming, he talked about a rebuild and having to get rid of certain players and so on. You can't all do that in one summer. And I was thinking the other day about this, because looking at the defenders remaining at the club, you have Chris Smalling, who I think
that's another one I left out as well.
We all think will be gone in the summer. That's a player he needs to get off the books. Phil Jones needs to get off the books. And Marcus Rojo, I think we all think will definitely be gone this summer too. He's on loan now back in Argentina, so he should be gone in the summer. So that's three defenders leaving. And if he does plan to play with a back three, he's going to have to sign another centre back in the summer, surely.
Yeah.
So weighing up the options, you could be getting in a 19-year-old with high pedigree, really, really good player, and I think he'd really fit into that. And as well, there's a lot of talk about Koulibaly, but if you're playing a back three, and as you mentioned, there's other issues up the pitch, surely the Ligt, after the season he's had, he wouldn't be as expensive, would he, as Koulibaly, or would they be around the same?
I actually feel Koulibaly may cost less money because Napoli are quite eager for a clear out in the summer. It's been obvious for some time that they're looking to get rid of what has formed a lot of the spine of the team. So there's Koulibaly, Hamsik, I think Allen, Dries Mertens, they're all looking to be moved on in the summer, and they want to bring in players to replace them. I mean, they've already started in the midfield with Fabian Rui has come into the midfield, been a big player for Napoli this season.
Brilliant player.
So Koulibaly may actually be a more cost-effective option. I think the issue with the Ligt is because, I mean, if there is any truth to that story, and like I said before, we have to take that with a pinch of salt, because at these kind of periods of no football, these stories tend to take on a life of their own. De Ligt would, at the bare minimum, we would have to pay what Juventus paid for him to get him, because they're going to want to make their money back on that, especially if they are eager to raise cash, especially in regards to the fact that Juve have a very, very big squad right now that they probably need to cut down. I imagine there'll be other priorities. I think people like Ramsey, Adrian Rabiot, they may be looking to get rid of. Dybala, they were looking to maybe get rid of because they needed the cash, but whether they've changed their mind on that, and I think people like Mandzukic as well. So there'd be more immediate priorities for them to get players off the books. So I think Koulibaly would be a more cost-effective option, would be easy to get. The only issue, if there's going to be a number of clubs in for him, I imagine Inter would be in for him because Conte has been chasing him for years. I think Chelsea are still in for him, and I would imagine there might be one or two of big clubs who are on the lookout for a centre-half who would be eager to get him as well.
Yeah, just on before we go talking about the midfielders United have been linked to, you mentioned Adrian Rabiot, the midfielder came from PSG, which United were heavily linked with last summer. How's he been this season?
He's been non-existent, really. He's hardly played.
So the same situation at PSG when he was like literally not allowed play and not allowed train, told to stay away from the training ground, that kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite that situation at Juventus. The situation at Juventus is, you look at the first choice midfield that Juve have, Dybala is the main attacking option. You have Rodrigo Bentancur, who is the kind of shuttling option to help cover the defence. Matuidi is still getting many, many games because he's a very, very reliable player to have to cover your defence. And then obviously the main guy in the midfield is Miralem Pjanic, who is the playmaker who makes everything happen, who switches the play, who pivots the whole team. So he has really struggled to get in. He has played some games, but not as many as I think as he would have hoped. He has been more of a squad player. He's a good squad player to have, though. I think he's a really good player. Like you mentioned, the issue at PSG wasn't the fact that he wasn't good, because before he fell out with the club, he was playing every week for them. And actually, a big problem that PSG had last season was that when they froze him out, they had nothing in midfield when Marco Verratti wasn't fit. And you could see that in the game that we played against him in the second leg, where United were able to just start bypassing their own midfield, and they just capitulated. So that's what's happened with Rabiot this season. He's just basically not been able to get in because of the more established options Juventus have that are already there.
Yeah, another great player that went to PSG and went completely missing was Javier Pastore. It's another one that went completely off the radar. But yeah, so midfielders now are linked with past few weeks, months. It's been a lot of talk about Jack Grealish and James Maddison. There's been a few reports saying United could sign both, but that was never really going to happen, I don't think, and it's certainly not going to happen now. It's something to bring in to have an extra option midfield, and you don't need to bring in the two of them after signing Bruno Fernandes. But Mike, some of the headlines in the past weekend haven't been too good for Grealish. Accused of drink driving, crashing into cars that are already parked, and pictured wearing two different types of flip-flops, as if like it really showed that he was under the influence. These kind of stories could jeopardise not just his transfer to Manchester United, but his career, because he's been in the negative light in the media before, when he was a young player, and some people said he was harshly kind of criticised. But this is a serious crime. So do you think it jeopardises his move to United?
100%. I think it does. One of the changes that we've seen with Solskjaer being in, and the changes he's instituted, is that the players, really, he wants an extremely high level of professionalism, especially after some of the players that have come in the last several years who have brought problems with them off the field. Obviously, Pogba's brought his own issues with him. Marcos Rojo was another one. Marcos Rojo was facing criminal charges in Argentina when we brought him to the club for having a fight with a neighbour. So that's... I think Solskjaer is very keen to avoid having this problem again, and it's a shame, because out of Maddison and Grealish, the two that we've been linked with, I would have taken Grealish. I think he's a better player of the two. My issue with Maddison is I find him more of a decorative footballer. He does pretty things. He's quite nice, but he essentially plays the same position as Bruno Fernandes, and he's nowhere near as good as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, Grealish really needs to sort himself out. I think the problems he had back in his first year at Villa, I mean, you can put that down to him being a teenager. You know, he doesn't do anything that most teenagers haven't got up to in their lives. But this guy's in his 20s now. He's a senior player at the club. He's an extremely important player at his club.
Captain.
He cannot be doing this kind of stuff. I mean, I suppose to some respects, if you're Aston Villa, it might be great because he's going to put off any of the clubs coming in for him. But it will be such a waste for him to chuck away what I think could be an extremely promising career with this kind of nonsense behaviour. I don't know what people he's got around him, but I would suggest that they're not doing enough to put his feet back on the ground, and they seem to be enabling this kind of behaviour. Because it's not the fact that he's got up to this kind of stuff, it's that he's got up to this kind of stuff with everything in the context of everything that's going on. Why was he out driving? Why was he out drink driving? What the hell was he doing when he's supposed to be at home like everybody else?
No, exactly. It's crazy. But you mentioned the people he had around him. His excuse is that he was going over to one of his pals that had texted him and asked him to come over. They were bored. You know, like, bullshit excuse. A fucking bullshit excuse.
We're all bored right now. Yeah. We're getting by the best we can.
Exactly, by recording podcasts. Connor, does it jeopardise his move to Manchester United? Do you agree with Mike?
Well, it's obviously just something that he shouldn't have put himself in a position. You know, Mike mentioned the people around him. You know, he shouldn't really need people to tell him what he should and shouldn't be doing. He should be old enough, wise enough, you know, early 20s, mid 20s to realise what, particularly as Mike again mentioned, with the circumstances of everything going on. But I think the All Blacks rugby team have a no dickheads policy, where basically if someone is involved in something like this, they're basically not considered for selection. Solskjaer has mentioned where he wants a high level of professionalism off the pitch, but an arrogance in the shirt on the pitch. That's fair enough. Like, for me, again, I agree in terms of the comparison between the two players, Maddison and Grealish. I think Grealish he's obviously a leader. He's the captain of Villa. He has often dragged them to results himself this season. Again, Maddison he's a great set piece taker, and more, again, as Mike mentioned, decorative in terms of adding finishing touches. But you can't really forget either that 3, 4, 5 months ago, I think Maddison was in the headlines for negative reasons as well, in terms of he was in the England squad, pulled out, was seen in a casino then, whether he was drinking or otherwise. It wasn't the right place to be at that time. And the slow news cycle in terms of what football reporters have to report on obviously will again focus attention even more on Grealish than it would have been anyway if we weren't all in lockdown. So whether it jeopardised his move to the club, I'm sure Solskjaer and everybody involved in recruitment would have done detailed background checks on all players. You just look at the 4 that he's signed since he's come in, nothing really is, in terms of negative headlines, has happened with Maguire, Wan-Bissaka, Dan James, Igalo, and obviously Fernandes. So that's 5. So, from that point of view, United aren't signing players who have outstanding criminal charges pending against them, like Rojo, anymore. But for me, I wouldn't necessarily say that it should completely rule out a move for him. It's a lapse in judgment, yes, but at the end of the day, a week or two ago, everyone to a man nearly would be happy with Jack Grealish coming in the summer. And the only question was, how much are we going to pay for him? Are Villa going to get relegated? Will that knock the price down for United? If they stay up, will we have to pay a little bit more? That was the only question. It wasn't a question of, do we want to sign Grealish? It's, how much can we get him for? We know Maddison is a United fan anyway, so the only thing that was really in the way for that one was talk of an extension at Leicester, and that's still dragging on. I don't think he has signed one. So again, either way, you're gonna be paying a lot of money, upwards of 50, 60 million for either one. And to be honest, I would still prefer Grealish this past week, notwithstanding.
Yeah, just to quickly add something on that. You mentioned Maddison. His problems cost him a place in the England squad earlier in the season, because he was set to be in the England squad, and then the issue with what happened with being at the casino and stuff, Gareth Southgate just refused to pick him and was quite open that he didn't pick him for that reason, and Mason Mount got his place instead. So these guys have got to be careful here. Of course we'd love Grealish, but he's got to really now spend this next several months proving that this is kind of nonsense isn't going to happen again.
Hashtag stay indoors, Grealish. Mike, I was going to ask you, is there any other midfielders United should be looking for that maybe aren't in the media? Because you kind of said that Maddison is quite similar to Fernandes, and Connor backed it up with his free kicks and so on. But is there someone that's maybe off the radar that you've seen in Serie A that might be worth a look, that fits into the profile of what United would be looking for? A young player with lots to prove, that's good and maybe arrogant on the pitch and quite off it.
I mean, he's been linked with the club before, but if you wanted a more attacking option in midfield, I think Sergej Milinkovic-Savic has been outstanding for Lazio this season. He had a poor season last season. I think his head was turned by he was being heavily linked with United the previous summer, and he had a very hit and miss season up until probably the run-in where he was excellent. But this season, I mean, the whole Lazio team has been outstanding, and he's been superb. He's got quite an unusual skill set in the fact that he is technically very good, but he's such a brute as well. He would be a perfect fit for the Premier League. So I would have said him. Interesting you mentioned Rabiot before. I would genuinely consider him as an option if we can get him for a good price. And there isn't going to be too much nonsense surrounding him off the field. I suspect there probably won't be. So those would be a couple of options. We could do with just maybe still looking at a more long-term replacement for Nemanja Matic, I think, in midfield as well. In terms of that kind of an option, Serie A, it depends who's available, really. I mean, and for me, the standout person I've seen in Serie A in that position has probably been Bentancur at Juventus before he got injured. I think he was very good, but whether Juve would be in the business of shifting him, I don't know. But he's a lovely, lovely footballer, very good at screening the defence, but also very good on the ball as well. And the best way to describe him is the Nemanja Matic with pace.
Yeah, well, that's one thing Matic certainly lacks, even more so nowadays. Another midfielder that might be on United's radar, Thomas Partey, Atletico Madrid. Connor, have you seen much of him? Because I watched him against Liverpool. That was the first game I really kind of sat down and watched what he was about, and he was fantastic. He was really, really good. And I think that's the kind of player Mike might be alluding to that's needed in midfield.
Yeah, well, I think a couple of months ago, you asked a few of us to write an article on, or a short piece on who we thought United should be going after. A lot of people said Bruno Fernandes, James Maddison, but I think I mentioned at the time, and I'd still believe that as well. That the player we actually should be going after from Leicester is probably Wilfred Ndidi in that kind of mould. And you've seen with like before the interruption to the season with Leicester, their form kind of tailed off a little bit, and that was directly linked to him actually being out. He's 23, I think, 24. He's Premier League proven. I do rate Partey. He's a great player as well. Another one also at Rennes is Eduardo Camavinga. He's only 17. French midfielder, and been linked with Real Madrid an awful lot in the last couple of weeks. But for me, if you're looking for someone who's Premier League proven, it probably would cost a lot of money as well. Leicester have just got a good track record of selling well. If you look at, say, any potential transfer for Chilwell, obviously Harry Maguire too. But someone in that mould, like Matic, has obviously signed the extension when probably 3-4 months ago he was for the exit door. I think it was probably only around December or January when Pogba got re-injured, when Matic kind of came back into the team. And he is getting on a bit, like despite his Instagram posts about what fitness work he's been doing at home. You do kind of need to move on from that. And you've got a solid midfield base to build off in terms of McTominay, Fred. They're the legs around Matic. They have been the legs around Matic in the last couple of months. But I would definitely look at Partey. Another one obviously has been Saul Niguez, has been linked with United as well. But I just think that someone who can snuff out attacks, similar to a Fernandinho, but a bit more physical. So for me, Ndidi is in that mould, and it just really depends how much Leicester are wanting from.
People might forget now with the season stuff when we go back to football of how good Fred has been the past while, and that's important. McTominay coming back, Matic should probably get a new deal. It's important, although we strengthen midfield, that we keep options there. Because Matic was another player, wasn't great at the beginning of the season, but after Christmas really started to come into his shell, and was very, very good and very important to that 11-game unbeaten run that we're on. Fred added a bit of samba to the midfield the past few weeks. He was very, very good and starting to show the kind of player that we were expecting to arrive from Shakhtar Donetsk. And we spoke a bit about him last week or the week before, Mike, and you were raving about him full of praise. But other than that, like the midfield has to be strengthened. The defence we've seen this season is definitely better than it was a year ago. The arrivals of Wan-Bissaka and Harry Maguire have been massive to United. And as well as that, we're talking about two players not only added on the pitch, but I'm sure they've added off it too, to get in a hungry youngster right back that wants to cement his spot that looks kind of certain to be United's right back for the next 10 or so years. And then you've got Harry Maguire at a time United were desperate for leaders and calling for leaders. Captain instantly. And I think that's even brought a few more out, because he signed Bruno Fernandes in January, and he's an instant leader as well. the likes of Williams coming in, young players, a bit of fire about them, they kind of have those ingredients. So I think Solskjaer's building something nice. I think he could be thrown off with this transfer window in this time of uncertainty, which could be a shame. But because of the run we've ended up on, I certainly don't want him replaced as manager. And before that run, we would have been still talking about Pochettino and Allegri and certain other managers. Mike, what are your thoughts, just before we wrap up the podcast, on Solskjaer's status, I suppose, as a fan?
I was not convinced when he was brought in as permanent manager at all. But I've seen enough. I mean, it really depends what happens when the season eventually restarts, which I believe it will. It depends what happens when the season restarts. But we had the last 10, 11 games. I think we were beaten about 10 or 11 games really going into this shutdown. We'd be much better. Yeah, the defence would be very good. I think Fernandes coming in and N'Gala to an extent had allowed Solskjaer to be a lot more flexible with his tactics as well. So you could see in the introduction of this, what was essentially kind of a flexible sort of 3-5-1-1 would be the best way to describe, I suppose, the system that we had. So that gave us something a little bit different, which I think was very good. And you'd seen that what he was trying to instill tactically into the players and the fitness of the players as well, because when he came in, I really don't think the fitness of the players was really up to scratch at all to play the way that he wanted them to play. They had started to really get into the groove on that as well. And in terms of what business he wants to get done, it's all going to hinge on what happens with Pogba, really. I think most Manchester United fans would like to see the back of him, and frankly, if we can recoup the money that we paid for him, that would be a tremendous boon for the club in terms of money going into the coffers to sign players. But I think he's earned himself another season. It's been a tough season this year. We always knew it was going to be a tough season this year, operating on a smaller squad. But one of the things that's greatly encouraged me is that he is, which I don't think previous managers had, post on its feet, he'd identified players with sufficient character to be able to take United forward and to get us back up into a position 3 or 4 years from now where we could be challenging for the league championship again. That was what we lacked, I think, in the last 2 years. And it was interesting. One of the things that really interested me about Solskjaer is that I saw an interview with Romelu Lukaku not long ago where the speculation was that they'd had a falling out. Lukaku actually said the complete opposite. Lukaku said Solskjaer was really great to him and tried to persuade him to stay. But I think at that point, Lukaku, sometimes as anyone could get in any job, just really wanted a fresh start and wanted to move. And in the end, we got a good price for him. But that just shows, actually, I think his man management has generally been pretty good. He's been very good on the discipline as well. So I think he's shown enough where he's earned himself another season at the club, which I know is a bit of a risk considering the managers are out there right now. But if you see what United have been doing for the last few years, every time we've made a move for a manager, it's been an enormous risk.
Connor, Ollie in, Ollie out.
Without a doubt in. But I mean, the main thing that I wanted from him this season was to make the team more likable, and I think you see that with as much as it would pain me and all of us to say it, that you see the link that there is between Klopp, between Anfield, between the fans, the fan base, and the players. They are as one. And the United team towards the end of last season just wasn't likeable. The Everton 4-0 defeat sticks out for me, I think, and probably for a lot of people, for all the wrong reasons. And the fact that we're here talking about football and pining for it to come back. Like, if this was to have happened in January, say after the 2-0 home defeat to Burnley, a different story completely, and the Poch in talk was around again, and United can't beat mid to lower level opposition at home, can't break teams down. The whole narrative has changed around the club, and there is a feel good factor, and he has earned, in my eyes, an extra season. The investments that he's made in the transfer market have, for me, all paid off. I mean, Dan James, probably since about November, December has tailed off, but he's played an awful lot of games, and I don't think any of us would have predicted that a kid coming from Swansea would be thrust in and be starting nearly every week. Whether it's in a front two, in a 3-5-2, or wide on the left, wide on the right. I'm definitely Ollie in. Harry Maguire's got better as the season gone on. I wasn't initially that impressed by him. Wan-Bissaka speaks for himself, I think, to be honest. And if United are going to be impacted by whatever financial hit there is from the coronavirus issue, and there may or may not be depleted transfer funds on offer, and if he has spent a large chunk of the budget on Fernandes in January that was allocated for the summer, I would trust him with, X amount of million in the summer again, or whenever the transfer window actually takes place.
I think what you just touched on is something that a lot of people might have to face up to. Is people might be thinking, reading about what the coronavirus is going to do to football, the financial situation. I really think that clubs are going to be hit this summer, and I think the biggest of clubs of Manchester United will be given cut transfer fees to cope with, because you look at the likes of even Alexis Sanchez, not even playing for Manchester United at the minute. They're still paying a massive chunk of his wages, and that's a weekly thing. I don't want to get into too much discussion about whether players should take cuts, because we all think they should, but a lot of players might be doing so at the minute without going public about it. Nowadays, you see, if you do something good nowadays, no matter what it is, people have to tell people on Facebook about it or on social media about it. I'm sure there's players there that might not want everyone to know, but might be giving a cut to the club, and I hope that's the case. I really do, and I'm sure some will come out and be public about it. But until next week's podcast, I suppose keep up to date with stuff on strettynews.com. Subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/StrettyNews. Strettycast is now on Twitter too, at Strettycast. You'll be getting tweets from Mike and myself there, rambling sweet nothings most evenings. Connor, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. How can people follow you on Twitter?
I'm at Gates Connor 1, or is it Connor Gates 1? I don't actually tweet that much. I am on Twitter for the purposes of following everything and anything from Sydney and keeping up to date with things back home in terms of football. But yeah, that's where you can get me.
Good stuff, and I'm sure we'll have you on the podcast again. Mike, again, you were on last week. I'm sure we'll probably be on again next week if you're around.
Absolutely. I think we've got another classic game to be going back over.
Yes. And I think that what I'm thinking of one at the minute that might not necessarily be a victorious memory, but lots of controversy to look into maybe.
I'm looking forward to that. You can let me know what that one is off the air.
Yeah, Intel. No squealing, Connor. No squealing. Don't be jumping on Twitter this one time to break the secret.
Right. I'll try not to.
Right, lads. Thanks so much, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks for listening.